Let's face it, when you get out into the woods on a camping trip, there's nothing more satisfying than a campfire. A good campfire, while camping, has been called the television of the woods and is known to be the only thing that the boogeyman is scared of. A fire in the woods can save your life, cook your food, and boil your water. Ask any survivalist, and they will tell you that there's no one way to start a fire. And that's the point of this video. This video is the third video in a series of videos getting back to the basics of survival. In the last video of this series, I demonstrated how to make a ridgeline and set up 5 various shelters. I even demonstrated how to make a shelter out of natural materials. And if you've not seen that video, click up in the corner and go watch it, then come back and watch this video. Now before we get into the meat of this video, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, thebugoutbunker.com. They're a small, American-owned online retail shop offering high-quality emergency preparedness and outdoor supplies, specializing in prepackaged bug-out bags, natural disaster preparedness kits, camping gear, and so much more. Follow the link in the description below and use the code that I've also put in the description to get a one-time discount of 15% off all prepackaged bug-out bags and natural disaster preparedness kits for the next 30 days. That's www.thebugoutbunker.com. Survival at its fittest. Now, starting a fire is not hard if you know what to do, but if you're not prepared and you don't understand the components of a fire, it can become a very challenging task. I'm going to give you several ways to make a fire while in a survival situation, and each example will have a short video about it. Now, let's find out how a fire is made, and let's go over the essential components of a fire. Fire is defined as the phenomenon of combustion, giving off heat and light from a flame. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look. There are 3 components to the fire. Think of fire as a triangle. On top, you have heat. On the bottom corners, you have oxygen, and then you have fuel. When all 3 components are combined, you have a fire. Oxygen is necessary for the fuel to burn. Oxygen always has to be present during every stage of fire building. No oxygen, no fire. The air around us has approximately 20% oxygen in it. When we inhale, our bodies use roughly 5% of that oxygen. When we exhale, 15% of the oxygen is released back into the air. The remaining oxygen is why a fire grows instead of being blown out when we blow on the coal to bring it to flame. Fuel is necessary to keep a fire burning. You can even break the fuel part down into 3 separate components: tinder, kindling, and fuel. Tinder is any material, natural or artificial, which can light with a spark. This material is usually folded together like a bird's nest to catch your spark and initiate combustion. Kindling is small twigs or wood shavings that kindle or nurture your fire and help it grow. Finally, you have fuel. Fuel is the larger items that burn and keep the fire going. Now, there are many ways to apply heat. You can use friction from a bow drill, a spark from a ferro rod, or a flint and steel, an ordinary cigarette lighter, or a magnifying glass. Even a water bottle can produce heat. Once your generated spark or heat is transferred to your tinder bundle and given oxygen, you will have a flame. This flame will then ignite your kindling, which you will gradually and continuously add fuel, and so now you have a fire. Now let's find something that we can use as a tinder to start a fire. Tinder is any material that is easily combustible. The material used as tinder for fire is very thin or made of very fine fibers. There are numerous types of fire tinder from natural materials that you can find in your environment, or man-made tinder that you can carry with you in a fire kit. The options are endless when it comes to man-made tinder, but for this video series, we're going to concentrate on natural materials. Any tinder you use lay a foundation for you to generate a spark and easily create a small flame. And as I stated previously, this flame will be nurtured and kindled into a larger fire. The natural environment provides so many things that we can use as tinder, from dry grass to dry leaves, pine needles, weeds, cattail fluff, bark from various types of trees. All these things can be broken down and processed into a very fine tinder, which will ignite when a spark is applied. In South Mississippi, where I'm at, a few of my favorite tinders is the use of dog fennel and goldenrod. These two weeds produce a very small fluffy flower in the fall, and then they die. When they die off and dry out in the late fall, they become one of the absolute best fire tinders available. And when left undisturbed, they're still available for use practically year-round. Now, depending on your environment or your geographic location, you may have other things that are native to your area that would make a perfect fire tinder. The key is to practice with different materials before you have to use it. What I'm demonstrating today is the bark from the cypress tree. You can also use bark from a poplar tree or a cottonwood tree, as well as the inner bark from willow trees. Bald cypress is everywhere on the rivers down here in South Mississippi. And as these trees grow, they shed their bark. This process of shedding the bark is known as exfoliating. As the tree grows, the bark splits, exposing the new bark underneath. The old bark that falls off is an amazing fire tinder and is easily ignitable with the spark. Now, in order to make this bark usable as a fire tinder, you have to break it down or process it down into fibers. Simply tug and pull and roll it in your hands. The more you work the bark, the more it'll expose the fibers of the bark. Once you're done, it should look like this. This process can be done until the fibers are so small it resembles a dark colored cotton ball. Combined with char cloth or ashes from a fire, you can even use this bark to start a friction fire, but more on that later. In my geographic location, the humidity is very high. In the summer months, it's almost unbearable. If you can't tell, I'm about to sweat to death. But this humidity does not help in fire production, especially with friction fires. Because it's always wet and raining, the material on the ground is always damp or wet. So, for our kindling, we need to look up. Finding kindling is easy. Essentially, it's a small dead twigs from smaller trees that got choked out and died. They became easy picking for your fire kindling. You will always be able to find dead limbs or sticks that have fallen from a tree and are hanging in the tops of small trees or vines. These smaller items from the small dead tree or hanging from a tree will be drier than the material that's on the ground. Now that we've gone over the basics, let me show you a few different ways to start a fire. In this next section, some friends of mine, Jeff and Jack, better known as the Two Old Farts in the Woods, are going to demonstrate two very common items that are used worldwide and are some of the most common ways to start a fire.
Like Spear Outdoors just showed you, no matter how you start a fire, you need three things to make it work: fuel, oxygen, and heat. Hi, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jack.
And we're Two Old Farts in the Woods.
This is a Bic lighter. It is the best one that you can get. We suggest using it because it is the most reliable and the longest lasting. These do have limited fuel in them though, so you want to use them for about 5 seconds at a time just to conserve fuel. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do when you get your lighter is it's got this little safety ring on it right here. You're going to want to pull that off because when it's cold and your hands are cold, that'll make it easier to strike. Okay, just get that off of there. Get that loosened up.
Yeah, just by using his multi-tool here with a little tool, he just loosened it and
comes right out with not too much effort. Hey, there it went. A few more things about lighters. One, I talked about how taking that off makes it easier to strike when they're cold. And when it gets below freezing, you might want to try something else because these don't work too well when it's below freezing. Also, you'll see that we've wrapped some brightly colored tape around it. Well, you always want to have a bright colored lighter in case you drop it. And just like with any other fire starting apparatus, you want to use good kindling and tinder.
Another very common way to start a fire is with matches. Now, matches are very common. They're found almost everywhere. They come in all shapes and sizes. They're versatile and they're easily waterproofable. But keep in mind, there are some disadvantages to using matches. For one, they're hard to strike in the wind or if your hands are very cold. Two, It may take many, many matches to start a fire. They can be easily ruined if they haven't been waterproofed. Also, the striker on the box can be ruined as well. So what we recommend is to take the matches out of the box and put them into some kind of container that's waterproof. This was made specifically to hold matches. And then also take the strip from the box, place them in the container as well. You want to do that because sandpaper doesn't really work. The little markings on the side of this doesn't really work. There's phosphorus in this strike pad that ignites the head of the match. So that's why we recommend keeping those two together, keeping them dry. We said they come in all shapes and sizes.
Now, Spear Outdoors is going to show you more primitive ways to make fire and make it easy.
Tool farts in the woods.
Thanks, guys. Give these guys some support and subscribe to their YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the description of this video. Now, let's move on to something a little bit more primitive, the ferrocerium rod or the FERRO rod. This method of fire starting has become the go-to method for survivalists and bushcrafters around the world. I've done a video on FERRO rods in the past, but for now, JJ from Fuel the Fires is going to break it down for you, and let's see what he has to say about FERRO rods.
I'm JJ with Fuel the Fires, and like Chris from Spear Outdoors said, all you need to start a fire is heat, oxygen, and fuel. And today we're going to focus on bringing the heat. More specifically, bringing 5,430 degrees of spark from a ferrocerium rod. What's the science? 1903, this guy with this formula, scraping it with anything with a Rockwell over 7. Bam, son! Knowing's only half the battle. Here's some ferro rod tips and tricks on getting the fire started. A quality ferro rod from a reputable manufacturer is a must-have for any survival kit. Why? They're lightweight, cost-effective, and even easy to use when you've lost your dexterity. Work! Always work even when wet. If you've got plenty of experience, then just about any size ferro rod will work. However, if you're just getting started, we recommend a 1/2 inch by 6 inch rod. Why? Because you increase your odds for success every time you increase the surface area. Now, you don't have to have a handle, but a good one can help. Please don't get those cheap plastic ones, they always break. I use Gorilla Tape and make my own handles. Just put the tape on the rod and start rolling it around. Gorilla Tape has all kinds of uses in survival, plus it's flammable. And then when I'm done with that, I add in a Ranger band to protect it and to add a little bit of grip. Also flammable. Another tip is using shock cord as a lanyard. That way it's firmly secured and you won't lose it. It's also flammable. Now you've got a force multiplier hot rod. You're also going to need something to scrape the rod with. For this demo, we're going to use the 90-degree spine on our knife. Time for technique. Here's 3 methods to help you out. Method number 1, place the rod in the tinder. Then put the spine of the knife on the rod. Now turn it 45 degrees and push towards the tinder. Method number 2 is great for kids or people with less experience. First, find something to brace the knife on. Now, instead of pushing the knife, you're actually going to pull the rod this time. Method number 3 is when you have less than ideal or marginal tinder, it's humid, and you need a little extra heat to get the party started. This time, you're going to go up and down as fast as you can. An alternative way to accomplish this is to very carefully scrape some of the shavings into the tinder and then ignite them. But wait, there's more. There's a little maintenance required. Notice the black coating on the rod. Once you scrape it, it's gone. Always scrape from the same side, and when you're done, use some bacon grease, olive oil, chapstick, whatever you've got to help preserve the rod. Now, after extended use, you'll start to notice that there are these ridges that start to form. As the spine of your knife goes down the rod, it starts to skip and jump, decreasing the effectiveness. Just use the file from my multi-tool when I'm in the field to keep it nice and smooth and to increase the surface area. If you're honey smack digging this video, make sure you go check out Fuel the Fire's content online. But before you do, let's check out another method to start some fire, and remember, Fuel the Fires.
Thank you, JJ. If you guys want to know more about survival and bushcraft, use the link in the description and head over and check out Fuel the Fires. JJ and his crew have tons of resources and a lot of great information. In our next video, we're going to break down fire even further. I'm going to cover bow drills, fire pistons, solar fires. I hope this video was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again. Until next time, God bless you.